Mark Rogers TV striking up the live chat. We are on a Tuesday night, yes, with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. Please join him right there. And on his show, The Way It Is, Fox 97.9. And certainly if I redirect you toward YouTube with the Touchdown Alabama channel, they release videos on a regular basis with great insight and analysis on Alabama football. Stephen, how you doing on this fine evening?
Doing good, man. First and foremost, happy that people can see my face. Had some technical issues the last couple of times.
Yes, we have had to take it the archaic way of the 1950s, but we still got the job done hearing your analysis. So that's the most important thing. But we do much, much more enjoy seeing the pearly whites. So we do have some quarterback news, and it involves recruiting, not 2019, 2018. So a spot to be filled on the current roster and a recruiting spot, a spot in the 2018 class. And Nick Saban has chosen to go the quarterback route to reinforce the position there.
Yes, he has, Mark. Nick Saban picking up a young man by the name of Lane Hatcher, who is a three-star dual-threat quarterback, according to 247 Sports out of Little Rock, Arkansas. Fun fact about Saban, since 2007, he wants to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster for each year, kind of having that insurance policy of if somebody gets hurt, if somebody decides to transfer, then he continues to keep his ducks in a row, so to speak. I know last year was the first year of the Saban era where Alabama had just three scholarship quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones. But getting Lane Hatcher, huge pickup. This kid, 6'1", 204 pounds, not particularly a big guy, but in his high school career, we're talking about over 15,000 passing yards, a guy that set a school record with 151 plus touchdown passes, and of course a career completion percentage of 74%, which was also a state record. I remember upon watching his film, within the first 6 games of his senior year last year, he had a touchdown to interception ratio of 38-1. So I'm pretty sure that caught Nick Saban's attention pretty quickly, that 38-1 touchdown to interception ratio, leading his program to a 5A state championship in Arkansas. You know, Coach Saban mentioning the accuracy, decision-making, athleticism that Hatcher has. But this just plays more into that numbers game that Nick Saban likes. Again, as I mentioned, wants to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, keeping that insurance policy. That now, does this say or does this state that, you know, a Jalen Hurts transfers, or if a Tua Tagovailoa is not named the guy, he's out? Not stating that. What I am saying is the numbers game is in play. Now, depending on what happens between Jalen and Tua, could parlay into that. But right now, it's about the numbers game, and Nick Saban has found his 4th quarterback on the roster by getting Lane Hatcher out of Little Rock, Arkansas.
Arkansas high school football is decent, not among the nation's elite, but it's solid. And based on the feedback I received from, in particular, my guy Andrew Hutchinson, who writes for 247 Sports on the Hogs, that Arkansas high school football is actually peaking, and one of the more talented classes over the last few years than they have had in decades at Arkansas. So one, Lane Hatcher is at the forefront of that, and now signing with the Crimson Tide after an impressive 38-1 touchdown to pick ratio, and that at the highest of the state classes at the 5A level. And we actually have somebody, Stephen, on the chat. Mr. Tyler Pulley is telling us that he is a classmate of Lane Hatcher. So he is, of course, heavily on behalf of Lane Hatcher, who can reinforce the troops there at the quarterback position. So we've got Stephen M. Smith on the line from Touchdown Alabama, and his show, The Way It Is, Fox at 97.9, Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 Central Time. And Stephen, I got to say, as I did off the top, that I've been catching the Touchdown Alabama videos here on YouTube. They're just extremely well done, insightful, and the analysis is tremendous on Alabama football. So if you want to keep up with the day-to-day beat on the Crimson Tide, you join Stephen and the crew right there. We are breaking down positions across the country. So we're getting you set with positional breakdowns for as many teams as we can get to. So we have knocked out Ohio State at cornerback and safety and special teams. We've looked at Notre Dame defensive line, Clemson running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. We've talked Penn State defensive line and running backs. And now we've got Stephen on the line to attack the Crimson Tide and get us started for the summer positional breakdowns. And let's start with Nick Saban's pride and joy there in the secondary.
It's going to be interesting because you're guys. 6 guys are now heading off for 6 guys now in the National Football League, graduated, moved on, replacing Minkah Fitzpatrick, Ronnie Harrison, Tony Brown, Lawrence Hootie Jones, guys like Anthony Averett and Levi Wallace. And though it's difficult to replace those type of guys due to the leadership they brought, the intangibles, the athleticism, especially those ball skills, tackling skills as well. When I look at Deontay Thompson coming back, he's the straw that stirs the drink for the secondary. Deontay Thompson returning in that safety spot. He's 6'2". He's crossed that 200-pound frame there. And I understand a lot of fans feel like in the college football playoff, the light bulb finally came on for Thompson, young man out of that Orange, Texas area. But the light bulb has been on for Thompson for quite a while now. And it was just a matter of Saban really trusting him. Me personally, Mark, I felt like Nick Saban overemphasized, overstretched Minkah Fitzpatrick in the sense of Deontay Thompson was Fitzpatrick's understudy throughout the 2017 season. We're talking summer workouts, spring practice, fall camp, going into the season. Deontay Thompson was right there, picking things up, absorbing things from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I really felt like the light bulb for Thompson was on prior to the college football playoff, but be that as it may, came on strong in the playoff, really played well, and he's got that old throwback hard-hitting mindset. Next to him, I look at Xavier McKinney. Now, he's coming into his sophomore year at the University of Alabama, but McKinney, to me, has a lot of Landon Collins in him. Young guy, but natural hard hitters, got some size. Got to work on that presence of mind of reading where the receiver's going, studying the quarterback's eyes, that type of thing, but that will come with more reps on the field. But as far as his physicality, his ability to lay the wood, help and run support, play these receivers physically, Xavier McKinney has that skill set. When I look at the cornerback position, Trevon Diggs, Savion Smith, both guys don't have the experience of an Anthony Averett or a Levi Wallace, but give me the athleticism of Trevon Diggs and Savion Smith. These two guys, both 6'2", 200-plus pound corners, long arms, very athletic, very rangy, possess a lot of skill. They bring a lot to the forefront. Savion Smith has a lot of playing experience coming from the JUCO ranks, Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. Prior to that, was a 5-star at LSU. Trevon Diggs, who last year won the starting job at left corner in fall camp, but had a nervous moment against Florida State to start the season, busted a few coverages, and just did not seem right. Did not seem like himself after he busted a few coverages. Nick Saban making the move to switch him out for Levi Wallace, and the rest is history. The former walk-on knocked down the left side of the field and ended up getting an opportunity to go to the National Football League. So when you look at Savion Smith and Trevon Diggs, big things expected for those two guys. They have a lot of promise. Also, Shaheem Carter in that star role, as good as Tony Brown was, as emotionally invested as Tony Brown was, Shaheem Carter, the better system fit, 4-star from Kentwood, Louisiana, 6 feet. Really played well last year in that star position coming off the bench. Coaching staff loves him. Players around him, they feel like he can call a defense. He can get guys set up in the right spots. like Shaheem Carter at star. At that dime position, a spot where Fitzpatrick played quite a bit last year, I look at Daniel Wright. He's not talked about enough, but Daniel Wright is quintessentially, if you infused Reuben Foster and Ronnie Harrison together, you would get Daniel Wright from a hitting perspective. And that's a bad dude. 6'1", 185 pounds. He and Eddie Jackson both hail from the same high school, Boyd Anderson High in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A lot of potential in Daniel Wright. I can see him at that dime package. So I know I hit you with a lot there, Mark, in the secondary, but I would see Deontay Thompson, Xavier McKinney at both safety spots. Give me Shaheem Carter at star in the nickel. For the corners, I like Trevon Diggs, Savion Smith, and that dime package, Daniel Wright. But then how can I forget? You got three freshmen coming in the summer with Jalen Armour-Davis, Josh Jobe, and Patrick Surtain, who a lot of people are high on. So this secondary, young but highly talented, Mark.
Yeah, so it's staggering to consider the names that you discussed that have moved on to the NFL draft and now to NFL camps. But we know better than to think, okay, there's going to be a huge drop off in this particular area, because we've seen it time and time again with Alabama moving on more players than just about anyone and more quality players than just about anyone to the NFL ranks, and many of them underclassmen. Deontay Thompson is, of course, a guy that had the most playing time out of everybody that you mentioned last season. 25 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and a pick. Xavier McKinney with 6 tackles, 1.5 tackle for loss. Trevon Diggs pitched in with 6 tackles for 6 total tackles. Shaheem Carter and Daniel Wright as well with 7 and 9 total tackles. Savion Smith, a guy that was rated the #1 cornerback out of IMG Academy, number 2 overall player. And then you tack on with all that talent, young talent, inexperienced talent, albeit the 3 guys that you mentioned that still have yet to hit campus in regards to a football sense, hit campus coming up later this summer. And people can't wait to see Josh Jobe and Patrick Surtain and what they can do at that position. And they may make an impact right out of the gate.
They have an opportunity, and especially Patrick Surtain. He's drawing a lot of comparisons to Minkah Fitzpatrick already from a mental standpoint in terms of processing information. It's just going to be, when these guys get here, Mark, how quickly can they pick up the material, put it down on the field, show the coaching staff, show the teammates around them how much they know what they're doing. A lot of times under Nick Saban, you have to show Nick Saban, coach, I know what I'm doing. I can take the angle away. I can make the tackle. I can break on the football. Just put me in a situation where I can be successful. So that will be the things that guys like Jobe, Jalen Armour-Davis, and Patrick Surtain will look to do. Like you mentioned, Mark, it's going to be difficult because you can't replace a Minkah Fitzpatrick. You can't replace the type of production that a Ronnie Harrison provided. Once again, Tony Brown may not have had the best career at Alabama, but once again, the most passionate, emotionally invested player to ever come through the capstone. I mean, the likes of Levi Wallace and Anthony Averett, 2 guys that were highly underrated. Levi Wallace, a former walk-on, and these 2 came in, did their job, proved their worth, and now in the National Football League, and even down to Lawrence Hootie Jones, somebody who played with the heavy heart. His mother, Jessica Carr, battled breast cancer a lot through Hootie Jones's playing career, still battling right now, and Hootie's able to compartmentalize himself into having a strong senior year, which he did have. I believe Hootie picked up 53 tackles, if I'm not mistaken, this past season. Played very well. Now he's awaiting on an NFL team to give him a tryout, but all those guys headed off to the pros or in the pros now. You can't use the word or term replace on those guys. What you can hope for is the guys behind them are able to give that maximum type of effort.
This is the place to be to get you set for the 2018 college football season. We are breaking down position by position on all the major teams. We've done work on Ohio State, Clemson, Penn State, and Notre Dame. We're getting started on Alabama tonight with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. Also catch him on his show weekdays 2 to 4 Central Time. The Way It Is, Fox 97.9. Have somebody mentioning here on the live chat about the prowess of the Alabama offensive line. They're excited to see the offensive line come together this fall. Stephen, I know I prepped you to break down the offensive line this time around, but I think we're going to leave that out there as a tease. I'm going to save that positional breakdown, and we're going to come back with Stephen sometime in the next week. I'm sure we'll be able to pull him back in, and we'll address the chat here because we've got a few comments on here. And this is not an easy thing to do, folks, is to take comments, cold calls, but Stephen, of course, up to the task. That's what he does there on his show at Fox 97.9. So NCIS Fanatic 21, Stephen, is wondering if Jalen Hurts will transfer if he doesn't win the starting quarterback job.
This is the most hot button topic right now. I mean, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not throwing the question about Jalen and Tua. And when you look at Jalen, I understand he's at work right now back home in Texas trying to prepare for the season. But it will come down to summer workouts, fall camp. I mean, you look at what Tua did in that national championship game. I understand it was one half of big football in a very important moment. But you look at how that team responded to the way Tua came out there and played and kind of, quote unquote, rescued that team to a national championship. When I look at Jalen, the biggest thing for him is, can he free himself from that fear of making a mistake? That's the biggest difference, in my opinion, between Jalen and Tua. With Jalen, he's so prone about, I can't throw an interception. I can't fumble the football. I can't turn the ball over. You know, if I do, what's Nick Saban going to think? If I do, is he going to bench me? If I do I lose my job? And a lot of times, Mark, when we see these athletes put that much pressure on them, it forces them to limit their offense. It forces them to take something away from the offense, not allow the playmakers around them to make plays, and you hinder what could be, something really special. There were times last year where, Jalen would have guys wide open downfield, whether it was Jerry Jeudy or tight end Irv Smith Jr., and if it was not Calvin that he could force the ball to, you would see a repetitive thing. Jalen rolling to the left, throw the ball away. Roll to the right, throw the ball away, pull the ball down and run, which would frustrate a lot of receivers, which would also frustrate Nick Saban, as we called him during the spring game with the microphone on hot there via ESPN, telling Jalen, hey, I mean, you've been here for 2 years, and here's our third string quarterback and Mac Jones that's whipping the ball downfield, with his arm guiding the troops in the process of that. So for Jalen, it's summer workouts, fall camp. He's going to have to fight like heck. And the big thing for him, if I was him in this situation, I would grab quarterback Dan Enos and a couple of receivers. I would not even take a summer class. I would grab Dan Enos and a couple of receivers, and I would say, Coach, help me. I want to be the number one guy. I want to be the guy to lead this team, but help me get the things that I'm weak in up to par. I mean, we saw what Dan Enos did at Arkansas, Brandon Allen, Austin Allen, Rufus in the pudding during his time at Central Michigan with Cooper Rush and Ryan Ratcliffe. So that's what I was Jalen Hurts. But in answering the question, it's a tough one, man. If he does not really show in fall camp he has improved and has really distanced himself, then I could see Jalen personally request that transfer waiver. I think he stays and he'll redshirt, but I think he'll redshirt, request that transfer waiver for December, and leave out after December, because it's so tough when you have Tua right there, but not to mention you signed Tua's brother, Talia, who has been for 29. Then you've got Alabama royalty and the grandson of Paul Bear Bryant, Paul Tyson, also coming in. in 2019. So when you got the brother of a big-time quarterback on the rise and royalty and Paul Tyson coming in, and you're Jalen Hurts trying to get it right, it puts you in a very uneasy situation.
So that is, as Stephen points out, the question for Alabama football fans in the summer of 2018. Most people want Tua Tagovailoa to win the job, and that's very understandable after what was on display in the second half and overtime of the national championship game at the Georgia Dome, or whatever they call it now, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And also with Jalen Hurts and what he's accomplished in college, which cannot be diminished. He got this team to a national championship game. He got this team to 3 national championship games. Or 2 national championship games. I apologize. And walked off the field against Deshaun Watson with the lead and was not able to get back on the field in a reasonable position to do anything about it the first time, and led to second half drives under pressure, the last one in the last 3 minutes, and got the job done in that sense, even though he had his spurts of off-target throws in that national championship game. He did lead the team in the clutch down the field against a very formidable defensive front. All right, Stephen M. Smith on the line from Touchdown Alabama. And this is, while that is the question of 2018, Stephen, I'm going to hit you up with the debate here on the chat. Concerns more so of an age-old question in college football, the age-old debate, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban. So I've taken this one on a number of times, so I'm going to leave the floor to you, Stephen, and then I may have something to say as well. So people are pitting Nick Saban and Urban Meyer.
I remember, I think a couple of years ago, this was the biggest conversation in college football everywhere you turned. You had Nick Saban 1A, Urban Meyer 1B, and Urban Meyer is an established coach. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. He won 2 national championships at Florida, 2006, 2008. Won a national championship with Ohio State in 2014. Now, the last couple of seasons, he has not gotten there. Dabo Swinney has really put Clemson on the rise, has really stamped Clemson as a team of the elite. And who would have thought Dabo Swinney, who at one point was an intern at Clemson, coming behind Terry Boughton, how he would go from being an intern to being probably the most beloved face at Clemson, and arguably one of the top coaches in college football right now. I still think Urban Meyer is elite. Now, I have my thoughts of I think Dabo Swinney has right now slightly edged him for that second spot. Behind would go Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Urban Meyer. But depending on how Urban does this year for the Ohio State Buckeyes, you got to replace J.T. Barrett, big-time quarterback. The one luxury you do have, J.K. Dobbins comes back. A phenomenal freshman year at running back this past season. When you look at the Buckeyes, they always recruit and bring in solid talent on defense, whether it was the Bosa boys, Joey and Nick. They've always had great guys in the secondary. Marshawn Lattimore was a guy back there this past season. They had Raekwon McMillan at linebacker at one point in time. Also, Ryan Shazier at one point in time was a Buckeye linebacker. Really hate that injury that happened to Shazier in the National Football League with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That spinal issue. I saw him back walking during the NFL draft, and that's a blessing in itself. But when I look at Urban Meyer, strong coach, but to me has taken a slight step back, not a giant step, but a slight step back to Dabo Swinney due to the rise that Swinney has been on as of late.
So as Stephen points out, especially after that 2014 meeting in which Urban Meyer's Buckeyes upset the Alabama Crimson Tide, the #1 seed in the first college football playoff, and then marched on in defeating what most people thought was the second best team in the country, Oregon, that put the argument in a position that it could be waged on even terms. 4 national championships for Nick Saban, 3 national championships for Urban Meyer, and then moving on to another school, as Nick Saban had done, LSU, Alabama, Urban Meyer, Florida, Ohio State, and proving I can take another program, build it from a place of mediocrity up to a national championship status. And at that point in time, it was a great debate. It was extremely close because it appeared as though Urban had the momentum. Saban had him by 1 championship, but Urban's a younger guy, and that they would just be waging war forever. Well, it hasn't quite worked out quite that way because of some college football playoff selections and some losses by the Buckeyes along the way. You also need to consider that the college football playoff is a selection process. So there have been times in which teams have been left out. It could be argued that Ohio State was gifted a spot in 2016 as a non-conference champion. It could also be argued that they were held out of the championship round despite winning what some people believe was the best college conference in America in 2017. I think what swings the argument has been 2 particular seasons in which Nick Saban had the opportunity, and to his credit, he seized the opportunity while Urban Meyer's teams did not have the opportunity. So if we rewind all the way back to 2012, we know that Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide, in the aftermath of the season, clearly looked like the best team in college football. They lost on one particular night against a hot Johnny Manziel at home. Other than that, they swept through the best conference in college football, beat a loaded Georgia team in a thrilling SEC championship, and then they laid waste to Notre Dame in the championship game, a game that was 42-14. It could have been 60-0. It was that much of a blowout. Urban Meyer took over an Ohio State program that lost 7 games the year before, and they went undefeated. Now, do I or any reasonable college football analyst think that Ohio State team was prepared to take on Alabama? No, but still, to lift a 7-loss team to a 12-0 record in the Big Ten is pretty substantial coaching.
It is. Now, wasn't Ohio State on probation that year?
They were on probation, so they could not play in the national championship, or it would have been Ohio State and Notre Dame.
There you go.
So Urban Meyer can't do anything about year number 1. He just won all 12 games, but he couldn't do anything about walking into a program with probation. And then if you skip ahead to 2015, follow my logic here, Stephen, and I believe you will. This was the year that Alabama eventually won the title over Clemson. They had a mid-season or early season loss to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was in the driver's seat. But Ole Miss, on a Hunter Henry flip over his head that I think it was Alex Collins picked it up. One of the 2 big Arkansas running backs. Yeah, picked it up on a 4th and 25 play in overtime, ran it for an improbable touchdown, and an almost impossible play. That knocked Ole Miss out of Atlanta and kept Alabama's hopes of getting back to Atlanta and the college football playoff in store. Basically, Alabama, in having an 11-1 season, 12-1 season with the championship game win in Atlanta, versus what Ohio State accomplished as the consensus number 1 preseason coming off the national championship run. Ohio State stubbed its toe against Michigan State, a very good team, but they stubbed their toe against the wrong team. Alabama didn't stub their toe against the wrong team. So Michigan State did not help out Ohio State as Ole Miss helped out Alabama. They basically had a carbon copy season of one another, 11-1, losing to a top 10 team, but Ohio State didn't get the help. Therefore, they didn't have a chance in what I would argue wasn't necessarily the very best team in the country, but the most talented team in the country. That team was ridiculously loaded, as the NFL draft showed us the next April, with Ezekiel Elliott leading the way and just gobs of talent, 6 first-round picks. That team, had that team been in the playoff, it would have been fascinating to see an Alabama-Ohio State 2015 game in the playoff. Would have been ridiculous. And so I'm just going to argue that if you look at the wins and losses, actually since 2012, when Urban Meyer was hired at Ohio State, he and Nick Saban both have 8 losses. The difference has been Alabama's been afforded 2 more opportunities. And to their credit, this is not an excuse, to their credit, they seized those opportunities and they beat the best teams in the country in the BCS or in the playoff to win 2 more championships than Ohio State.
That they did, and you look at Urban Meyer in the upcoming season, Mark, and as I mentioned, Urban has a chance to really, get back to the conversation of being number 2 behind Nick Saban or being 1B. I just look at Ohio State. Typically, the Buckeyes will keep a fresh running back. The Buckeyes typically keep fresh guys on defense. I mean, they rotate guys like stacks of guns. They rotate guys back and forth on that defense, and then offensive line, wide receivers, they keep a pretty loaded stack there as well. Replacing JT Barrett will be the big thing, but I feel like the old horseshoe over there in Columbus will have somebody to take the reins with the departure of Barrett to the National Football League. If Ohio State can find itself in the college football playoff this upcoming season, then Urban Meyer is in a great spot. Once again, one of the best coaches as far as scheme, motivation, recruiting, getting the maximum effort out of your players. Urban Meyer is one of the best at getting the maximum effort out. I mean, you look at what he did with Tim Tebow at Florida, Braxton Miller at Ohio State, JT Barrett at Ohio State. I mean, look at what the guy did for Cardale Jones at Ohio State. I remember in 2014, Cardale Jones, 3rd string quarterback. I mean, did Urban Meyer not get the max out of him or what? After that 2014 season, you had NFL scouts telling Cardale Jones, you are a 3rd-round pick. Leave Ohio State, into the draft right now. After 3 games, you've built up a 3rd-round draft stock. We all know the story, though. Cardale Jones said, I'm going to go back to school. Didn't have the greatest success coming back to school, but, Urban Meyer did groom him in 2014 to have a 3rd-round stock.
Cardale Jones actually left college with the dubious distinction of never losing a college football game. He was 10-0. He went 3-0 down the stretch, won the big games, of course, Wisconsin, Alabama, Oregon to win the championship. The next year, he went 7-0, but the offense just wasn't clicking, and they turned to JT Barrett late in the season, stubbed their toe against Michigan State. Then they crushed Michigan and Notre Dame, 2 top 10 teams, to finish off that season, but just missed the playoff. And Urban Meyer's had 2 teams finish 5th in the country that didn't make the playoff, but they were clearly the best team not in the playoff, but didn't get the opportunity. Just to let you know, Stephen, Dwayne Haskins is the guy that's going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State this year. He had a 6-for-7 showing in relief of JT Barrett against Michigan, in which the Buckeyes were down by a score in the 3rd quarter, and he played extremely well. He's a faster and a stronger arm version of JT Barrett, probably not as tough of a runner, and the leadership skills, who knows? We will see what happens there. I don't think there's any question. There is no question that Alabama is the gold standard. They won another national championship this year. And while I have an issue with the selection process that is the college football playoff, it cannot be argued that Alabama, when they get in that thing, it takes a last-second Deshaun Watson, super Herculean effort to knock them off. Otherwise, they're money. They win these things when they get in them, going back to the BCS era. So they are the gold standard, and that can't be argued in any way on the field. If you look at recruiting, I think 4 programs have separated themselves as basically being right there. And that's Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, in some order, are grabbing the best, most elite talent. And that's not debatable. Nobody's, and somebody might say Miami or somebody like that, like 1 year, but I'm talking about over the last 3 or 4 years, Georgia just getting into that class. And obviously we saw what they accomplished last year.
Miami's coming with Mark Richt. Miami's coming. I'm excited to see what Willie Taggart does at Florida State in his first year as a recruiter down there in Tallahassee. But I mean, like you mentioned, Dabo Swinney and Clemson. I mean, who would have thought Dabo Swinney, the whole bring your own guts, dancing in the locker room, that type of guy would be a trailblazer on the recruiting ground, which he is. I mean, Dabo Swinney snatched a guy and Justin Ross from Alabama at wide receiver. Justin Ross played at Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama, and took that 6'4" kid right over there to Death Valley, South Carolina, and Clemson. I look at Georgia. The pressure is on Kirby Smart now. Kirby Smart, first season, Bulldogs went 8-5. Last year, his second year, got Georgia to the national championship game. If it wasn't for a 2nd and 26 from Tua Tagovailoa to Devontae Smith, Georgia wins that game 23-20. But now the pressure is on Kirby Smart because the Georgia fans look at, you came from Nick Saban, you sat under the feet of Nick Saban for 9 years. You know what happened in Nick Saban's third year at Alabama. Hint, hint, Bama won a national championship. Georgia fans believe they've got Nick Saban 2.0 and Kirby Smart. Year 3 is coming in for Kirby Smart. So what do Georgia fans expect? They would expect the national championship. And yes, Kirby's got the class with a ton of 5-stars, including quarterback Justin Fields, who is battling with Jake Fromm, though I think Jake Fromm holds him off and maintains that job. DeAndre Swift at running back is no joke. Also, Elijah Holyfield, son of Evander Holyfield. That guy can run the football. Georgia's got a ton of receiving talent. Defense is going to remain a priority with Mel Tucker over there. But just the expectations of, it's year 3, Kirby. Now it's your time to win a championship. Kirby faces that heat in this upcoming season. How does he deal with it? Will be the biggest question. But you hit the nail on the head, Mark. Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. Those 4 really the measuring stick, the ambassadors when it comes down to recruiting.
All right, folks, Coconut Cane, Stick 118. I appreciate you jumping online here, but you'll need to jump back to the beginning of the video and check out what we've been talking about concerning Alabama and the nation as the conversation has expanded over the last 45 or 50 minutes because people love debating college football and not just a particular team. But I have found out that these discussions always balloon into people debating over who's better, what quarterback, what coach, what team, what conference. They bring it out to the national scale. And I always love the debate. We got Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama on the line. You got to join him on Touchdown Alabama on YouTube with frequent videos outlining the concerns and the questions and all the analysis on Alabama football headed toward 2018. And of course, on Touchdown Alabama online and Fox 97.9, the way it is. Guys, we appreciate you jumping on the chat. And Stephen, thanks so much for dropping by.
No problem, Mark. Happy that I can see my face again now on the camera.
And not as happy as I am.
I know you are thrilled.
I love it.
You are thrilled,
gotta see my guy. Gotta see the expressions. Gotta see the whimsical look.
I'm just happy my microphone actually worked this time.
Yes, it's a good thing.
I'm just happy the microphone here, actually worked this time. But definitely doing this again. And next time I guess, Mark, we'll look at the offensive line question. Definitely going to bring that up, but offensive line, wide receivers next time.
We can do that. All right, Stephen, you have a good night.
You too, man.